In this video, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the new Retrostone 2 portable handheld console and see just how well this thing can play games. This is Steve from Restalgia, and let's get started. This unit was sent to me as a review unit by 8B Craft, the makers of the Retrostone and subsequently the Retrostone 2. They are a French company and successfully funded this project through Kickstarter. That campaign is currently over and they just started shipping these things out to their backers. However, if you are interested in purchasing one, I will leave direct links in the description down below. Now with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get this thing out of the box. Now I was actually sent the Retrostone 2 Pro Edition, so I did get a few extra things in here and I will mention what they are as we go through this. The first thing in here that we're going to get is a user manual with a ton of different language options. It's really nice to see that they're kind of covering their entire user base, so it doesn't matter what country this is going to, you're going to be able to read through it in your own native language. Next is the first bonus item specifically for Pro Edition recipients. We have a glass screen lens replacement with the extra adhesive. This is a really nice touch, and as most people know, a glass lens does look substantially better and much harder to scratch than the stock plastic ones would be. We have the console itself, but we're just going to go ahead and set that aside for the time being. And then underneath the cardboard here, we are provided with a microSD to SD card adapter, which comes in handy if you don't already have them. We've got some replacement conductive pads, and finally, we also get a set of different color buttons if you're looking to change things up a little bit. Taking a look at the console itself, it looks pretty good and feels really solid in my hands. I should mention to remember to make sure to peel off the really thin layer of film that they have attached to the screen to get a really good idea of how it's supposed to look. A lot of people leave it on there and it kind of looks like it's got a scratched finish, so be sure to take care of that right away. In terms of internal specs, the Retrostone 2 comes loaded with an Allwinner A20 dual-core processor, clocking in at 1 GHz, which is actually a downgrade from the original Retrostone, which is really disappointing. That had an Allwinner H3 quad-core processor. Because of this, we're going to notice some games do not run as well as we had hoped, or even as well as they did on the first Retrostone, but we're going to go ahead and take a look at that in a little bit. The GPU is a Mali 400 MP2. It has 1 GB of DDR Ram. The screen has had a major upgrade from the original Retrostone, now with a really sharp looking 3.5-inch IPS digital display with a 640 by 480 resolution. The Retrostone 2 now has built-in Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. The Pro model specifically comes with an 8GB NAND memory on board and an MT M.2 connector that can actually support up to a terabyte of storage if you wanted to move away from removable SD cards altogether. The device has a removable 4000 mAh battery for extended gaming sessions, which is actually really nice. Additional batteries will eventually be available for sale directly on the 8B Craft website. In terms of the device IOs or input outputs, on the left side of the device we have a 5V micro USB port for charging, a volume wheel, and a 3.5mm audio jack. On the opposite side we have our accessible micro SD card slot and an HDMI out port. There is nothing along the bottom, but on the top we have our soft touch power switch, which has a built-in safe shutdown, and we've got 3 USB ports for accessories or multiplayer support and an Ethernet port for easy networking. Now I should mention this device does not come preloaded with absolutely any games for obvious reasons, and it also doesn't come with any software. Now we're provided with download instructions and directions on how to get this thing up and running, which is easy enough if you're familiar with how to write an image to an SD card. In terms of our controls, we have our standard D-pad with 6-button layout on the front, including our start and select buttons. But a nice feature that is included is that we have 4 buttons on the back to act as our L1-2 and R1-2 buttons. I found that it's a little bit weird that the L and R2 buttons are actually on top of the L and R1 buttons because your index finger naturally rests there. So you would think that your index finger would rest on the L1 and your middle finger would rest on L2, but it actually is the opposite. Now I would personally have flipped those, but this is something that's pretty easily fixed and remapped right in the software. In terms of software, the device is currently only supported by Retro Orange Pi, but it does run Emulation Station, and I'm personally a huge fan of this front end simply because it's got a simple yet elegant and fully customizable nature. Additionally, this device can also run in desktop mode if you want it to act as a micro PC, and although it has an on-screen keyboard, I would highly recommend using a physical mouse and physical keyboard for optimal use. In terms of size, this device is about the same size as the G-Pi case from Retroflag. It's similar in a ton of ways. One of the major differences though between the two is the screen quality on the Retrostone is so much better. You can see a huge difference when comparing the two side by side, even when it's captured on camera. In terms of emulation, I'm going to show you guys a little bit of gameplay from a wide variety of different consoles and games, and I'm going to mention both the good and the bad here. First up, we're going to go ahead and take a look at Game Boy. So first off, we have Kirby's Dream Land. Both Game Boy and Game Boy Color games run flawlessly on here, to no one's surprise. The audio sounds fantastic, the controls are really responsive, and the on-screen resolution looks fantastic. Next, we're going to go ahead and jump into Sega Genesis, or Mega Drive as it's known in some of the other parts of the world. Just like with Game Boy, this plays absolutely perfectly. Now I've got Sonic 3 playing on here flawlessly. NES is another one that plays really well, and I had absolutely no problems with any of the games I tested, but I'm going to show you guys Super Mario Bros. 3. Now I wanted to get into some consoles that were a little bit more power hungry, so I decided I would give Sega CD a shot. Now I wasn't 100% sure how well this would run, but I was actually really pleasantly surprised by it. It ran incredibly well and didn't have much of any trouble getting it set up. Now keep in mind I did have to load up the BIOS for it, and I had to get the proper format and choose the correct core for the format of game I was playing, but once I did that, everything ran really well. Next, I decided to try Super Nintendo, and this is where we started to run into some problems. Now, for the most part, it played games fairly well. For example, I've got Mighty Morphin Power Rangers here, and it played perfectly fine. Most of the games, like I said, are going to play fine, but I had some really poor performance with any FX game I tried, to the point where it was not even worth playing them. I tried a few different titles like Star Fox and Yoshi's Island, and they were both performing and stuttering really bad. I think this is a direct result of the lower end CPU being used, and it's pretty disappointing. Moving on to the next console, we had equally bad performance from Game Boy Advance. The games ran really slowly and the audio sounded really bad, and it just wasn't a good experience. Now obviously your mileage may vary. For example, I did play Simpsons Road Rage, and although it wasn't perfect, it was certainly playable. but it was a little less than ideal, but you could make do with it as it was. In terms of 3D consoles, N64 is not playable in my opinion at all. Now I knew this based off of the specs and didn't really mess around too much with it, but it would have been very complicated, especially considering we don't have any sort of analog input, and the specs are not going to be powerful enough to play 99% of the games. But PlayStation 1 ran fairly smoothly. There is certainly more optimization that can happen, but if you're not too picky, you could definitely get some gaming in here. All in all, this is a decent little handheld, and it absolutely has one of the nicest displays of any of the handheld devices I have used to date. The performance is a little lackluster, but if you aren't looking to play some of the more demanding consoles, this might actually be a good pickup for you. Thanks to Pierre and the 8B Craft team for sending me this out for review. That's all I've got for you guys in this video. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and give the video a thumbs up. Let me know in the comment section below what you guys think of the Retrostone 2. Thanks for watching, and I will talk to you guys again real soon.